Hi, I'm Belinda Carley, the Director of the Institute of Personal Care Science, and I often get asked, can I swap this material for another? Or some people newer to formulating might ask why we always use trade names in our formulas, or if we don't, why we specify certain suppliers of materials. So today I wanted to make a video to show you just how much a formula or product could alter when you use a material from a different supplier, even when the INCI name appears to be the same. So let me show you a few examples and talk you through some common materials where there really is a big difference if you use a different grade of a material or a different supplier of a material. The first I want to show you are some simple carbomers. Now over here I'm using Carbopol 980 from Lubrizol, and here I'm using Carbopol Ultras 10, also from Lubrizol. Now looking at them on the watch glass, there doesn't appear to be a lot of difference, but there's actually a very significant difference in the way the products feel when they're applied. The 980 material is a very cushiony feeling material, while the Ultras 10 is a very light and refreshing skin feel. Now, if these were making up a gel product, the sensory aspects are significant. Even just looking at the Lubrizol range, there are some significant differences between their different grades of materials with seemingly similar INCI names. So as you can see from this simple example, there can be a significant difference in the way the product feels and even its viscosity by using a different material, even though it has the same INCI name. It's not just synthetic materials that work like this either. Here's an example of some xanthan gums by Keltrol. Now you can see here there is a difference in the viscosity of the products and also the flow aspects, where flow versus stringiness is important. There can also be a significant difference in the appearance of different grades. And these are again xanthan gums from the same supplier. So even from the same supplier with the same INCI, the grade or the trade name is really important to specify in a formula, otherwise you can get very different results. Here's another example using some cocamida propylbetanes. Now I've used exactly the same combination of materials in these two samples, but there is a flow difference between the two cocamida propylbetanes, and there is also a color difference. That viscosity difference is also enough to mean the difference between the suitability of using a tube for product dispensing or whether a pump might be needed instead. Another example of differences with surfactants is sodium cocoyl isethionate. Here I have a sodium cocoyl isethionate from one supplier that comes in flake form, and here I have a sodium cocoyl isethionate that comes from a different supplier in powder form. Now when I put these into my formula, this one needs around 50 degrees heating for about 20 to 30 minutes to fully dissolve in the water. This powder form I can drop straight into slightly warmed water, about 35 degrees, and it will mix and dissolve quite rapidly. So the method of processing between using these two different grades of material is significantly different. This powder form is also really irritating in its raw form, so production staff would need to use some respiratory protection, as it's very irritant for the lungs if inhaled and just handled during processing, whereas the flakes don't have this issue at all. So again, same INCI, different processing method and different handling during production. It's also interesting to note that surfactants come in a variety of different grades based on the percentage active content they contain. And this is really important in a formula because if I use 10% of one material, I might have 3.3% active sodium cocoyl glutamate, for example, compared to 10% of another material where there's only 2.5% of active material present. There's other examples where the differences can be even greater. If I was to use 10% of Hostapur SAS 60 in a formula, for example, they'd be equivalent to 6% of the active material, and it comes in a solid form. Whereas Hostapur SAS 93, if I was to use 10% of this in a formula, there'd be 9.3% active surfactant, and it comes in a pellet form. Trade names are incredibly important with these types of materials, where different grades, even from the same supplier, could be different percent concentrations of active material. And this has a big impact on the formula and its performance. Another example are, these are both dimethicone. The INCI name is dimethicone. This one is 100 centipoise viscosity. This one is 350 centipoise viscosity. So there is a significant difference in their viscosity and also their skin feel. The 100 CS has a very light skin feel, while the 350 CS has a more cushiony, velvety feel on application. If I was using 5 to 10% of these in a cream or a lotion, for example, I would end up with a very different skin feel result. And if I was to mix and match my different carbomers and dimethicones, I could also find a significant difference between the skin feel of my final formula from just using 2 different grades of 2 different materials, even from the same supplier, and even though the INCI name is still exactly the same. I've got another example for you here. This is cetyl alcohol cetyl glucoside blend from 2 different suppliers. You can see there is a significantly different viscosity response from the 2 different emulsifier blends. Now, it's not to say that one is especially better than the other, it's just that they're very different. So if I was to create a formula using this material here, for example, Montanov 68, and then try and substitute it with Emulgade PL 6850, I would find I'm going to get a very different viscosity from just substituting a material with what appears to be exactly the same INCI name. I've got another example for you here. This is using Cosmowax D, which is cetyl alcohol cetyl 20, and Emulgade 1000 Ni, which is also cetyl alcohol and cetyl 20. Again, the same INCI name, but very different results when used in a formula. We can even see very different results from apparently the same INCI name when it comes to active ingredients as well. For example, a lot of different peptides may have the very same or similar sounding INCI names and very different results on the skin. We also see this with different extracts, like a high-grade licorice extract with whitening results versus a cheap or standard grade of licorice extract that doesn't get the same results. We can find a zeta fraction of a green tea extract that is really high in polyphenols and antioxidant activity, and we can use a standard or cheaper grade of green tea extract with very different or very little results. We also see different grades and trade names get used where the concentration is again important and there might be different preservatives used. For example, here's a list of different Merquat 550 series. They've all got the INCI name polyquaternium 7, but they come in different concentration ratios, which means the recommended input you need to get the results varies based on their concentration. You'll also notice there's very different preservatives used in the different grades. So for example, if I wanted to avoid parabens, I'd need to use Merquat 550 PR. If I didn't specify this in my formula, you could be using a Merquat 550 that contains parabens, and that may be against your company philosophy. You'll also see that there are some materials that come as a straight powder versus those that come as a liquid. So the powder form wouldn't need a preservative at all, but it does need different processing to get into the formula, and it needs a very different input to the diluted liquid version. Well, there you go. There's just a few examples of where the same INCI could mean very different results in your formula, the finished product, the performance, the processing, or even handling of the raw materials. Make sure when you write your formulas you're using the full trade name. Be careful with spelling and make sure you include the full trade name, because as you just saw, a slight difference in trade name can have a big difference on what preservatives might be present or what performance that active might have. If you're using materials from a smaller supplier, then make sure you use the INCI name or name that they use on their website and specify the supplier after you've written the name of the material. This helps make sure that every batch of product is going to come out the same every time. And when you're handing your formula to a contract manufacturer, it helps make sure that contract manufacturer uses the same materials, the same grades, and ideally the same supplier that you have to get the same result that you did when creating that formulation. I hope you found this video useful to see just how different materials can be, even if they appear to have the same INCI name. It can mean very different results. Please give the video a thumbs up, please leave any questions or comments below, and make sure you subscribe to receive notifications about all our videos. Happy formulating!